Hi, and welcome to Book 13 of the Odyssey. So this is an important book because here Odysseus leaves behind the sea and ends up on shore on his own island kingdom of Ithaca. So now begins a whole nother sequence in which he has to regain his kingdom. There are a few important things that we need to pay attention here to in Book 13. One is how Odysseus himself becomes lost in his own grief and what that means, what that signifies for us as his readers. And the second thing is, what is this scheme that he's cooking up with Athena? What is the plan and how will it unfold? Hi, I'm Gray Miles and welcome to the Odyssey. Come on the journey with me. So in this chapter, Book 13, we leave the sea behind. In many ways, this has been a story of the ocean, of a man adrift, cast adrift, wave-tossed, right? Almost drowning, his boat's shattered, and now finally he leaves the sea behind. Not challenges, mind you, not the threats to his life, not the difficult negotiations with his family that he'll need to undergo. Danger still awaits Odysseus, but for now, the sea, we leave the sea behind. And so this is a very important juncture in the story because the Odyssey is about a man on the ocean, right? In many ways alone against the forces of Poseidon, the sea god. But now he leaves that behind. And the story begins with him taking leave of these incredibly generous and wealthy hosts, the Phaeacians, right? And in this we see the power of Odysseus' storytelling bears fruit because they're so overwhelmed with how amazing his story is that they can literally do nothing except shower him with gifts, right? Give the greatest gifts that they have to offer, the most spectacularly opulent of their wealth. And the ship itself, right, takes him finally to his home island of Ithaca. So in this we understand the power of storytelling, right? Odysseus is in 800 BCE Greece. He's like Beyonce up there on the stage at the Grammys, right? They're applauding. They can't think of anything else but just to shower him with roses, whatever there might be, right? They throw at his feet because the story has been so good. So they laden him down with treasure. And the story is careful to tell us more even than he would have been able to bring home from the war at Troy, they give him, right? And they send him on his way. They swaddle him like a child in fine sheets and blankets on the prow of the boat, right? Like a loving parent would. This is how much the story has moved them, right? They treat him like some sort of celebrity that they love. And then they send him on his way, and the boat slips through the night silently, right? As if carrying him into a sweet dream. Odysseus finds himself, wakes up, right, in a beautiful place, but he does not recognize it because Athena has cast a shroud of mist over it. But the author is careful to describe it in beautiful, glowing terms. And in this moment, we see how the ancient Greeks worshipped place itself, right? Much like the indigenous people of North America, they had a sense of individual spots as being living beings. And they personified nymphs, in this case nereids, water nymphs, to describe how this place was a kind of living thing. There is an olive tree, long-leafed, the author tells us, draped over the water, right? And a beautiful dark cave, right, tucked away in the cliffs. A safe harbor where ships can come in and they will no longer be battered by the relentless waves of Poseidon, right? And inside that cave, beautiful women, nymphs, right? And honey brought by bees. There's a sound, you can hear the sound of bees buzzing inside the cave, right? And you feel the sort of beauty of these nymphs at work weaving with purple cloth on their looms in the shadows of this beautiful cave. Odysseus is laid down here. Once again, the author tells us that the Phaeacians wrap him, swaddle him like a child in soft sheets, and lay him down in the sand gently as you would a loved one, right? And in this we start to see the element of a kind of guardian angel, which we all still think of to this day as perhaps being present in our life at times, right? Someone to watch over us, someone to carry us gently down and lay us down in the soft sand in the safe harbor. Who among us hasn't yearned for that experience? And so Odysseus wakes up in this beautiful place, but it's still invisible to him. And now we see how the author shows us how sometimes the most beautiful things that surround us can be obscured by the workings of our own mind. Odysseus is in the throes of a kind of depression or a panic attack, right? Now the author describes it as the mist of a goddess, of Athena, obscuring it from him. But we see him crying out in uncharacteristic self-doubt, right? He's tormenting himself with anxiety, self-loathing, really, on the shores of this beautiful island. The contrast is unimaginable and striking in this moment, right? Because here he is, lost, his mind tormented by these intrusive, unwanted thoughts of how he's failed, of how he still hasn't arrived at home, and how his treasure will be stolen from him, right? And in this moment, we see him really at rock bottom. In no other moment has Odysseus truly despaired as pathetically, as pitifully as he has in this moment, right? And he even curses the Phaeacians who treated him with such kindness because he's so twisted up inside at not knowing where he is. So as readers, we should really read this passage of how it's possible sometimes to miss the beauty, right, that surrounds us, our own home, the things that we love, the people who love us. We sometimes can't see them because of the mists, the fog of our own mind descending over our eyes. So at this point in the story, we have to pause and ask ourselves, what does this torment that Odysseus is in tell us about his character? We know that the ancient Greeks were incredibly astute at assigning these hellacious torments based on the type of character who committed the sin, right? So here Odysseus is on this beach, on his own home, right? Shrouded in the mists of his own insecurity, his own self-loathing. What does this tell us about his character? Why is Athena punishing him in this particular way? Well, this is a man who has relied on his wits and his self-confidence his entire life to get him out of scrape after scrape, from seduction to seduction, right? From leadership to glory at the walls of Ilium. So what would be an appropriate torment for such a character? It would be the loss, the ripping away of his self-confidence, the dashing him on his own home shores without him even realizing the beauty that surrounded him, losing his wits in depression, in fear. So, for the moment we understand that, right? We understand that the ancient Greeks possessed that concept. And then the story moves to a kind of ego conflict between the brothers Poseidon and Zeus, as Poseidon complains to his brother, saying, how come Odysseus gets away with going to Ithaca again and landing there with all this treasure after he blinded my own son, Polyphemus? And Zeus says, look, if you need to punish someone, do what you need to do, right? So Poseidon then transforms the ship that dropped Odysseus off on his home right? Back in Phaeacia, he transforms the ship into a mountain, into a stone in the harbor, blocking the ships from having to leave. Now, scholars have wondered at this point in the story, does this reflect a folk memory of the ancient Minoan civilization, which predated the Mycenaean Greeks, but was itself an enormous flourishing, an output of art, of learning, and of conflict and war, right? It collapsed, perhaps due to some kind of earthquake that brought a tidal wave into Crete, destroying the civilization. Now, it can't be a coincidence that Poseidon is the god of earthquakes. He's known as the Earth Shaker. In fact, in this very passage, he's referred to as the Earth Shaker. So why would a sudden stone mountain stuck in the harbor of an island very similar to Crete, from a civilization very similar to the Minoans, be there unless it was a kind of folk memory, right, of an ancient civilization now lost to the mists of time? As we see Odysseus' period in time, so the people then saw another period, another great civilization lost in the midst of time, and so on and so forth, hopefully for eternity. At this juncture in Book 13, Odysseus and Athena, man and god, enter into a teasing battle of wits, right? And this is one of the many battles of wits that Odysseus has engaged in throughout this book, right? The story is telling us this man battles other people with his wits, right? There is no question about that as being fundamental to the story of his life. And now he's doing it with a god, right? Yes, it's a god who favors him. It's a god who loves him. But still they are at odds because Athena disguises herself. And once again, we come across the theme of disguise, the way in which things can be hidden and not immediately apparent, obscured to us, right? A big part of the Odyssey and its thematic content. So, Athena disguises herself as a beautiful shepherd. She shows up. Odysseus is in this kind of state of absolute despair, and he throws himself at the mercy of this beautiful shepherd, begging for help, right? And then the shepherd says, "You don't know where you are? You must be a fool. She's teasing him. You're in your own home, and you can't even recognize it." She starts describing how Ithaca is beautiful, the characteristics of its landscape which set it apart from other parts of Greece. She's very specific. She uses the same terms that he himself has used to describe this home that he loves, right? And then finally at the end, she says, "You're home. You just didn't know it," right? And Odysseus breaks down, but he doesn't. The book says that his words want to take wing, but he bites down on them as if his words are an escaping bird leaving his mouth, that he snaps his teeth down, his jaws down to prevent from escaping, right? Because he's always on his guard. He's always wary, right? So then he enters in to a kind of chess game with Athena, who is flattering him, saying how I've always loved you. But he reminds her, you didn't always protect me. You might have been my god, but you didn't always protect me. You left me behind and vulnerable, right? When I left Troy, at the mercy of your uncle Poseidon. And she says, oh, I'm not to blame for that. That's his rage, right? And they come back together gradually, piece by piece. They allow one another to grow this sort of intimacy and trust once again, right? Now, what's interesting here is to consider what this might mean on a more psychological level, right? On the level of mythopoetics. What does a god who is a manifestation of an inner state of self-confidence mean, right? When the god is kind of building Odysseus back up from the depths of his despair, right? It's as if Odysseus, like all of us, is giving himself a pep talk, saying, I am intelligent, okay? I have authority. I have strength. I'm not a total wimp, moron, fool. right? He's building himself back up from the kind of depths of this self-loathing and depression that his situation has cast himself down in. He's talking to himself, muttering to himself as he paces up and down the beach, right? Gradually becoming a man again, right? After having been just at the depths of despair. So, when we examine this dynamic between Athena and Odysseus, we can see both the guardedness, the deceit, the lies, right? But remember that the Greeks admired liars to some extent. Those who could make fiction become true through the authority of their willpower, right? And their imaginative force. The Greeks saw themselves as a race of storytellers. And what is a storyteller except someone who can weave reality out of fiction? So the battle of wits has to some extent been resolved. Athena has tormented, has tested, has teased, has even flirted with Odysseus on the beach as he's arrived home in Ithaca, right? And on one level, here is this god who is his kind of patron saint, right? His protector, his guardian angel, if you will, right? The goddess who symbolizes planning, scheming, wisdom, right? All of the great talents that Odysseus possesses in such great number, right? And abundance. And on the other level that we spoke of earlier, here we have a man whose trajectory has cast him down into the depths of despair, right? Who totally falls apart when he finally arrives at home and thinks that everything has gone against him, and weeping and wailing, right? Succumbs to self-hatred. And then on a psychological level, Athena emerges as his superego, this part of himself which comes back to say, no, you are the man of many turns. You have ideas. You have options. You can be more than this pathetic creature weeping on the shores of your own home, lost, right, in a twisting, spiraling turn of despair in which everything looks the same, bitter and tasteless to you, right? And so this personification of this God that watches over him is in a sense part of him and gradually builds him back up, right? And then the two parts come together and they start to make a plan. They start this wonderful, incredible experience of imagining, thinking, and moving towards executing, right? This kind of human quality that very few other animals or organisms share, right? Now, in some ways, it's a terrible quality, but in other ways, it's beautiful. And now they begin to come together to start planning how he will retake his kingdom. So Athena tells him of the situation that's going on, right? Where the suitors have taken over his house. His son is away on a mission trying to restore diplomatic ties with Menelaus. Some suitors are awaiting his son, right? In an ambush to try to kill Odysseus' son Telemachus, right? Meanwhile, the suitors surround his wife like vultures, like hyenas, trying to prey upon her and feed off of his kingdom and leave him with nothing, right? So now, the part of the story where gradually we begin to turn to the plot of vengeance, right? Revenge, which Nietzsche tells us is a dish best served cold. Why? Because you wait, you lurk in the darkness, you wait, you wait, you wait, and then you spring your trap, right? And how sweet it will taste when revenge finally comes. But before this can happen, and this is another interesting moment in the story, Athena must transform Odysseus so that he's unrecognizable to the citizens of Ithaca. How does she do this? She transforms him into a miserable old beggar, okay? Ugly, filthy, withered, right? A kind of worm that you would kick away from the table if he came crawling towards you begging for a scrap of meat, like an old dog that deserves to be put down. That's what she transforms him into. Now, why is this? We have to ask ourselves, why does the storyteller, for this magnificent hero, the man of many turns, why does the storyteller create this disguise of an old, filthy beggar, right? Well, we have to look into the way in which this story has compassion, right? For the refugees, right? For the homeless, for those scattered by the destruction of a great Bronze Age civilization in the Mycenaean. What happened in the Greek Dark Ages? Well, everyone was a beggar. Everyone was a refugee. Just about. Everyone was wandering around filthy, dirty, unclean, right? And so this is because the wisdom of this story tells us we are all simply steps away from that state. And therefore, we must be compassionate. We must recognize the beggar in all of us. Because even the greatest of heroes can fall, and does in this case.